how you doing? Welcome back. I hope you're well and I hope you're having a great day. Today we're back on the Racing Green. I'm going to be fitting some Timken front wheel bearings. I won't speed it up. I'll try and do it pretty much in real time. I did run into some problems though. The bearing shell, the hub was worn a little bit, so the bearing shell was no longer an interference fit. So you'll see how I get around that problem in today's video. Thanks for tuning back in. I hope you enjoyed today's video and I'll catch you again on the next one. Cheers. Right, so we're going to do it a bit differently this time. I'm going to overhaul this hub. So obviously we've already cleaned it up, wire brushed it off and given it a lick of paint. Now we need to fit new bearing and fit new swivels. I'm going to try and go through it in real time. Do something a bit different for the video. So first off, we've got a set of their Timken bearings. They are more expensive than the normal sort of aftermarket ones, but they are much better quality. Definitely on the front wheel bearings, I would not mess around. They're a match set, so there'll probably be a bit of advice in here telling us that are a match set. Yeah, so match set, so you do not want to mix up the races. As they come, they will be already sort of taped together. I'll show you. When I say don't mess up the races, I mean don't, you know, obviously get that bearing race with that shell with that bearing race. They are matched. You can see they've actually got numbers engraved onto them, and the spacer in the middle is also matched to those bearings, so they're a match set, so don't mix them up. Couple of things to point out quickly. I didn't notice this, it's only till I've just seen it now. The old bearing, as I'd have said in the previous video, the grease seal had failed on it. It had obviously leaked out a lot of his grease. The bearing races had started getting hot. And I think the reason the grease seal had failed is because these were missing. These are not circlips, they're like spacers. Well, they're very much like a circlip, but there's no groove for it to go into in the back of the hub. It's literally there just to space out the rear seal. So the rear seal is the correct distance behind the bearing. If you look inside the seal, it's got a lip inside there. So if you press it in too far, that lip then won't do anything, and chances are you'll probably mess up the spring seal in there. So that was missing on both sides on the old bearing. So that's probably why the old bearing set failed. So like I say, just be careful not to mix these up. The races themselves, when it comes to fitting them, so let's just get these together. There we go. And then what I like to do, so yeah, they're the way round I want them at the moment. When it comes to fitting them, fairly simple, just going to use a tool like this. It's soft aluminium, so this is kind of sacrificial, so it doesn't damage the race. Or the shell of the bearing. It's much softer than the shell, so it won't damage it. So the first thing I want to do, just look inside, make sure there's no obstructions, no dirt, no dents, any imperfections inside there, especially on the seat at the bottom where the bearing will sit. And then when we hammer the bearing in, it should be quite straightforward, but we're just going to be listening. You do it by listening really. You should hear when the bearing hits the bottom, hits the lip. Hopefully it'll come out on camera. So we've got the right size mandrel on there. Don't go too mad. You might find it starts out a little bit wonky to begin with. If it does, just don't keep. Just try and tap it on the side that needs to go down a little bit further. Don't try and force it in wonky because it could crack the bearing race or shell. And we're just listening for the difference. Quite a much higher tone when you get to the bottom. So that's all the way home now. Let's just have a very quick look, visual inspect on the inside, and we can see that's home all the way. Now, rather than fit the other race, no, I will fit the other race now, or the other shell, sorry. So again, make sure you don't get them mixed up. In fact, just to be sure, I'm going to put a B and an F. I won't mix them up, but I've had, not that I've never done it before. So this front one, now this front one is a little bit loose. So what we're going to do is we'll degrease all of this, and we will fit some bearing and thread lock on there. That should help keep the bearing shell in place. So I need to degrease this now. We use brake cleaner. So although that's not a super tight fitting that side, it's not a problem. The Loctite will dry and keep that snugly in place. So now the rear bearing, we just need to grease this up now. In fact, yeah, let's grease it up now. So one thing to call out very quickly is the Timken bearings don't come with grease. You know, that one thing that you don't really need when you're replacing bearings, grease. Again, frustrating. Luckily I have a pot of bearing grease. Always a bit messy this. There's different methods of doing it. You can use like the sandwich bag, where you put the grease in the sandwich bag, put the bearing in, and then put the grease, pack the bearings. But to be honest, I just prefer to do it by hand, get a bit messy, pair of gloves on. And you just want to work the grease in, make sure the grease has gone around all the rollers. When you look in the back of the bearing like this, it should all have grease inside it. Just hold the middle, give it a rotation. You'll feel when the right amount of grease is in there and it's worked around. When you do that, just a last light coating of grease on the outside. And then put the bearing in. Don't go mad with the grease, you can overdo it in the grease. So there goes our bearing nicely in there now. Now, like I say, we then need to fit this. And like I say, it just acts for a spacer for the seal. Just fits down inside there. And now we want to fit the seal itself. Now this back end one, we just tap it down. Sometimes you can just push it in by hand, but just that's going to want a bit of persuasion. Just tap it down until it's gone all the way home. And again, you do kind of get that change of tone when it's gone fully home all the way. And that being spaced out now should just ensure that lip doesn't fit too far inside the bearing. When the CV joint goes in, it finishes off or seals it up. And then there's this protector as well, which goes between the grease seal and the wheel bearing. Often that gets forgotten. So we just put it in now. So there we go, that's the back one done. The front one, most important bit, don't forget that spacer, otherwise the bearing will just get wrecked very, very quickly. We need to grease this one up as well. I've got something in that bearing. Must have been a bit of crud in the grease. There we go. Now this front seal you almost certainly want to try and do by hand. You can push this seal in too far. It should sit flush with the outer edge, and if you just hammer it in, it almost certainly will go in too far. But I find just do it by hand and you'll be okay. And then what's good is if you've got a mandrel like this, which is bigger, there we go, perfectly uniform the whole way round. Don't ask me why, but they give you 2 split pins, although they are 2 different sizes, to be fair. That's why they give them. Shame they don't give you grease, but you get some split pins. So that's the bearing done now. We just need to, I'll have a bit of a tidy up and then we'll get ready to fit these shims on. Bear with me a moment. Right, so after building up that hub and Loctiting the bearing in, I finished, went inside, and I sat there contemplating whether I'd use the right type of thread lock. Done a bit of researching and I don't think I did. Now it might be fine, but I don't want to risk it. So I done a bit of research, got some Loctite 603, this is really expensive. And I'm just gonna take that bearing shell out again, put it back with Loctite 603. Be interesting to see actually, that's been a week. It should only take 15 minutes to harden, it's anaerobic. It'd be interesting to see how tight that bearing shell is in there. So I'll get on with it. If I'm careful, I should be able to take it apart without damaging anything. We'll re-Loctite it and then a bit of peace of mind. Right, so that's the bearings out. Managed to get the seals out without damaging it. Be interesting to see how tight this is. Right, so that Loctite, like I say, it was 6263, which is for thread locking. It still held that bearing in there pretty tight. So I probably didn't need to do this, but it's peace of mind, isn't it? Let me just grab a clean cloth. You can actually see inside there, it's like pink where it's adhered to it. So we'll just wipe that round. We'll degrease it. And then we'll put it in with fresh thread lock. Sorry, not thread lock, it's like bearing lock. But yeah, I probably didn't need to strip it all back down again. That had actually worked pretty well. But hey, I'll be able to sleep at night now. you can actually see the adhesive on there. It's very, very good thread lock, but there are, or Loctite, there are lots of different types you can use. That's it. Probably too much on there now. Right, there we go, that ain't going anywhere now. Let me get this reassembled. Right, so there we go, all back together. That Loctite 263 had actually held that bearing in there pretty well, but not quite the right stuff to be using. I used Loctite 603. It's anaerobic, takes about 10 minutes to dry. It actually works in greasy and oily environments, so it's ideal for, I think they recommend sintered bearings, but this should be fine, and it will lock in a bearing with a gap of 0.15 millimeters. So yeah, that's good. That's all back together now. Like I say, I probably didn't need to do that, but at least it's peace of mind. I know that bearing's not going to move now.